Apparently, being downgraded from wife to co-worker at your husband's award ceremony is the universe's way of saying your marriage has an expiration date you weren't informed about. There I was, Tuesday evening, November 12th, wearing the champagne Dior gown I'd custom-ordered for Corbin's big night at the Charleston Harbor Resort Ballroom, watching my husband of 20 years accept the Outstanding Community Leader Award from the South Carolina Medical Association. The irony? The pediatric wing he was being honored for? I designed it. Pro bono. The $2.5 million donation that made it possible? My family's foundation. The connections that got him on the hospital board in the first place? My grandfather's 40-year legacy at Charleston Medical Center. But when the MC, some overly Botoxed socialite named Petra who once tried to recruit me for her book club, asked all the honorees' spouses to stand for recognition, my darling Corbin gestured vaguely in my direction and said, "That's Clarice. She works with me at the hospital. Works. With him. Not my wife. Not my partner of 2 decades. Not even the woman who bankrolled my entire career. Just works with him." Like I was some random pharmaceutical rep who occasionally dropped off samples. The silence that followed could have cut glass. You could actually hear Mrs. Adelaide Thornton, old money, 4th-generation Charleston, knew me since my debutante ball, choke on her champagne. The woman literally coughed so hard her Cartier necklace jangled. Half the ballroom knew exactly who I was. Clarice Margaret Beaumont, Virginia Tech architecture graduate, daughter of the Beaumont family that had endowed half the historical preservation projects in Charleston, and very much married to the man currently acting like I was hired help. I did what any proper Southern woman would do. I smiled, raised my champagne flute in a delicate toast, and silently activated the protocol my grandmother taught me when I was 16. Never make a scene, darling. Make a statement. The thing about old Charleston families is we don't yell. We don't throw drinks. We certainly don't create spectacles at charity galas. We simply restructure circumstances. Methodically, ruthlessly, with impeccable manners. I should mention that Corbin Frederick Hayes, 43 orthopedic surgeon, thinks 3-piece suits make him look distinguished, had been increasingly distant for about 8 months. Late-night emergencies at the hospital. Weekend conferences in Atlanta. That thing men do where they suddenly start using cologne they've never worn before and doing crunches in the morning. The signs were there. I'm not an idiot. I have a master's degree in architecture from a top engineering school. I can calculate load-bearing structures and design emergency evacuation routes. You think I can't spot a cheating husband? But I'm also practical. Before you burn a bridge, you make absolutely certain you don't need it anymore. So I'd been quietly gathering information. Bank statements, credit card receipts, that burner phone bill he thought was hidden in his gym bag, the hotel charges in Greenville, where, coincidentally, the hospital's annual orthopedic summit is never held. Here's what I'd discovered. Mirabelle Celeste Fontaine, 29, anesthesiologist, originally from Baton Rouge, positioned at Charleston Medical Center for the past 14 months. Brunette. Petite. One of those women who does hot yoga and posts about wellness journeys on Instagram. She had a very interesting definition of assisting in surgery that apparently included assisting Corbin out of his wedding vows. The really fascinating part? Corbin had been introducing her as his colleague at hospital functions for months. Same word he'd just used for me. Apparently, that was his entire vocabulary for women he was sleeping with. So there I stood in that ballroom, surrounded by Charleston's medical and social elite, applauding politely while my husband collected an award for humanitarian work funded entirely by my family's money, and something inside me just clicked. Not broke. Clicked. Like a lock opening, or a safe, or a very expensive legal strategy falling into place. I'd been raised by Martha Jane Beaumont, a woman who'd survived 3 husbands, 2 stock market crashes, and 1 very ugly country club scandal in the 80s. She taught me that revenge is a dish best served with proper documentation and a team of attorneys who golf with judges. The gala ended around 10:30 p.m. Corbin was busy networking with potential investors for some new surgical center he wanted to open, using what capital I couldn't imagine. since he was approximately $340,000 in debt from medical school loans I'd been quietly paying off. I smiled at all the right people, thanked them for coming, and left early, claiming a headache. I wasn't lying. I did have a headache, from 20 years of playing supporting actress in my own marriage. Wednesday morning, November 13th, Corbin came down to breakfast at our Trad Street brownstone, 4 stories historic district, belonged to my family since 1887, and found 3 things waiting at his place setting instead of the usual coffee and croissants. 1. Formal eviction notice. Turns out, when the house is in your family's trust and your name isn't on any ownership documents, you're essentially a long-term guest. A guest who can be asked to leave with 30 days' notice. 2. Cancellation notification for the insurance on his BMW 7 Series, the one I'd been paying for, along with the car payment, and the maintenance, and that custom leather interior he'd insisted on. 3. A letter on Beaumont Foundation letterhead, signed by me as acting trustee, formally notifying the Charleston Medical Center Board that the $2.5 million pledge for the new surgical wing was under immediate review due to concerns about fund allocation and institutional integrity. And I was sitting at the breakfast table, already dressed for my 9 a.m. meeting with Paxton and Sterling, the most vicious divorce attorneys in South Carolina, when Corbin stumbled into the kitchen. He looked at the papers, looked at me, looked at the papers again. What is this? His voice had that edge it gets when he's about to gaslight me. I'd heard it 1,000 times. Clarice, what are you doing? I took a sip of my coffee. French roast. The expensive kind from that place on King Street. What am I doing? Well, Corbin, I'm working. You know, like colleagues do. The beautiful thing about marrying into old Southern money is that men like Corbin never actually read the paperwork. They just sign where you tell them to sign, assuming their charm and medical degree make them untouchable. Corbin stood there in our kitchen, well, my kitchen, holding those documents like they were written in ancient Greek. His face went through about 5 different shades of red before settling on something between sunburned and cardiac event. You can't evict me from my own house, he said, which was adorable, really. Like watching a toddler insist the sky is green. Your house? I set down my coffee cup with the kind of deliberate precision my grandmother used when she was about to destroy someone's social standing. Corbin, darling, your name appears exactly nowhere on the deed. This property has been in the Beaumont Family Trust since 1887. You've been living here as my guest for 20 years. Lovely guest. Ate all the food, used all the hot water, brought shame to the family name. But still, just a guest. His jaw actually dropped. It was the same expression he'd had when I'd first introduced him to my family's lawyers, and he'd realized that the prenuptial agreement he'd signed, the one he'd barely glanced at because he was too busy planning our honeymoon in Tuscany, was basically the legal equivalent of an Iron Maiden wrapped in Tiffany paper. This is insane, he sputtered. You're being irrational. I called you a colleague because I didn't want to seem like I was bragging about my personal life at a professional event. Oh, is that what we're calling it? How professional? I stood up, smoothing my theory pencil skirt. Tell me, does Mirabelle also appreciate your professional discretion? Or does she get introduced as your physical therapist? The color drained from his face faster than champagne from a broken bottle. Bingo. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, which is what every guilty man says right before he starts explaining exactly what you're talking about. Mirabelle is a colleague, an anesthesiologist. We work together. In Greenville, on weekends, at the Hyatt Regency. I picked up my Birkin bag, the one he'd claimed was an investment piece when I'd bought it, right before he'd spent twice as much on golf clubs. Because the Charleston Medical Orthopedic Summit has never, in its 40-year history, been held in Greenville. I checked. I'm detail-oriented like that. Architecture degree, remember? We measure things. Watching Corbin try to formulate a response was like watching a computer crash in real time. You could almost see the blue screen of death loading behind his eyes. Clarice, listen, he started, reaching for my arm. I stepped back smoothly. Don't. You'll wrinkle the Dior. Here's what I'd learned in the 72 hours since I'd started actually paying attention to my husband's extracurricular activities. Corbin wasn't just having an affair. He was having a midlife crisis with a business plan. He'd been positioning Mirabelle as his associate at hospital functions, introducing her to investors, laying groundwork for some new surgical practice they were planning to open together, using my family's connections, my social capital, my reputation. The man had literally been networking his mistress into Charleston's medical community using my last name as collateral. It was almost impressive, like watching someone steal your car and then ask you for gas money. "I have a meeting downtown," I said, walking past him toward the front door. "With Paxton and Sterling. You've heard of them, right? They handled the Rutherford divorce last year. Took poor Montgomery for everything but his dental fillings. Excellent firm. Very thorough." "You're divorcing me?" Corbin followed me into the foyer, his voice climbing into registers usually reserved for teenage boys and poorly tuned violins. "Over a misunderstanding?" "Oh, honey, no." I paused at the door, turning back with my sweetest smile. The one I used at junior league meetings right before I voted against someone's pet project. "I'm divorcing you over 8 months of hotel receipts, 63 text messages you forgot to delete from your iPad, which is synced to the iCloud account I pay for, by the way, and a particularly fascinating credit card charge from Tiffany's in Colombia for a diamond tennis bracelet I've never seen, though I'm sure Mirabelle wears it beautifully." I opened the door, then paused. "Oh, and one more thing. That $340,000 in medical school debt you have. The loans I've been paying off for the past 15 years? According to my attorney, those qualify as investments in your professional development. I'll be seeking reimbursement. With interest. Sleep well, darling." The drive to Paxton and Sterling's offices on Broad Street took 12 minutes. I spent 11 of them on the phone with my cousin Barrett, who sits on the Charleston Medical Center Board of Directors. "Barrett, sweetheart, it's Clarice. Remember that $2.5 million surgical wing donation? The one honoring Daddy's legacy? Yes, that one. I need you to put it on hold. No, not permanently. Just until we can ensure the funds are being allocated appropriately. You know how particular I am about family money going to worthy causes." Pause. "Oh, you heard about the gala? Word travels fast." "Yes, it was unfortunate. No, I'm perfectly fine. Never better, actually. I'll explain everything at Sunday brunch." By Thursday morning, November 14th, half of Charleston's medical community knew that Dr. Corbin Hayes' marriage was imploding and the Beaumont family money was officially off the table. The other half knew about Mirabelle. Small southern cities are funny that way. Everyone knows everyone's business by second breakfast. My attorney, Sutton Paxton, 58 Silver Fox, handles every major divorce in Charleston County, laid out my options with the efficiency of a cardiac surgeon. "Mrs. Hayes, given the prenuptial agreement and your separate property claims, this is fairly straightforward. The house is yours. The investment accounts in your name are yours. The Beaumont Family Trust is untouchable. Your husband has his medical practice, his personal vehicle, and whatever assets he acquired independently." "Which is essentially nothing," I said pleasantly. "I financed his partnership buy-in at Charleston Orthopedic Associates. I paid for the medical equipment in his private practice office. I even funded that ridiculous golf club membership he uses to schmooze hospital administrators." Sutton's smile was the legal equivalent of a shark spotting blood in the water. "Investment recoupment is absolutely on the table. We'll itemize every dollar you invested in his career and seek full restitution. Education expenses, practice development, professional equipment, it's all documented. Color-coded spreadsheets going back 19 years, I said. Architecture degree, remember? We like things organized." "You're my favorite kind of client," Sutton said admiringly. Friday afternoon, November 15th, I met with Barrett and 2 other board members at the Charleston Place Hotel tea room. Very civilized, very discreet. The kind of meeting where reputations are quietly dismantled over cucumber sandwiches and Earl Grey. "The Foundation's concern," I explained, adding a precise amount of cream to my tea, "is that Dr. Hayes may have misrepresented his personal circumstances in applying for board positions and donor recognition. The Outstanding Community Leader Award specifically honors individuals who exemplify family values and ethical leadership. Introducing one's wife of 20 years as merely a colleague while conducting an affair with a subordinate staff member seems inconsistent with those values." The silence that followed was delicious. Board member number 1, Thaddeus Monroe, old family, Older money cleared his throat. The optics are certainly problematic. Quite, I agreed. Particularly given that Dr. Hayes's affair is with an anesthesiologist under his professional authority. The hospital's ethics policies on workplace relationships are rather clear, aren't they? Barrett, bless him, knew exactly where I was going. Clarice, are you suggesting the board should review Dr. Hayes's professional conduct? I'm not suggesting anything, I said innocently. I'm simply noting that the Beaumont Foundation takes its charitable partnerships very seriously. We'd hate for our family's reputation to be associated with institutional ethical lapses. Translation: fix this, or the money disappears. By Saturday morning, November 16th, Corbin had received a formal letter from the hospital's ethics committee requesting a meeting to discuss his professional relationship with Dr. Fontaine. He called me 17 times. I let every single call go to voicemail. Sunday brunch at the country club was delightful. Sunday brunch at the Charleston Country Club is where reputations go to die, usually somewhere between the shrimp and grits and the third mimosa. I arrived at 11:30 a.m. November 17th, wearing Chanel, because nothing says I'm winning my divorce like impeccable tailoring, and found myself immediately surrounded by the Charleston social militia. You know the type. Women who've turned gossip into an Olympic sport and philanthropy into a blood sport. "Clarice, darling, we heard?" Adelaide Thornton said, air-kissing both my cheeks. "About Tuesday night. Absolutely mortifying. If Montgomery had ever introduced me as his colleague, I would have had him audited by the IRS before dessert was served." "The IRS seems excessive," I said mildly. "I'm just having him audited by divorce attorneys." The laughter that followed was the sound of 12 women who'd collectively buried 4 husbands and bankrupted 6 more. But here's the thing about Southern women's networks. We don't just gossip, we strategize. And by the time I'd finished my eggs Benedict, I'd learned 3 fascinating pieces of information. First, Mirabelle Fontaine wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She'd been sleeping with Dr. Pierce Weston, chief of cardiology, until approximately 6 months ago, right before she'd transferred from cardiac anesthesiology to orthopedics. Apparently, she had a type: married surgeons with expense accounts. Second, the Tiffany tennis bracelet Corbin had bought her, purchased with a credit card that had my name on it as the primary account holder. He'd added himself as an authorized user years ago, and I'd been too busy actually earning money to notice he was spending it on jewelry for other women. Third, and most interesting, Mirabelle had been telling people at the hospital that she and Corbin were planning to open a wellness-focused surgical center in Mount Pleasant, with her as co-founder and chief of anesthesiology, using investor connections she'd made through Corbin's hospital contacts he'd made through my family's 40-year relationship with Charleston Medical Center. The girl wasn't just a mistress. She was a business partner. She'd basically franchised my husband. I excused myself from brunch and made a phone call to someone I'd gone to Virginia Tech with. Marin Whitlock, forensic accountant, currently investigating Medicare fraud for a federal agency I'm not allowed to name. We'd been roommates sophomore year. She owed me for that time I'd covered for her when she'd accidentally set off the fire alarm trying to make midnight ramen. "Marin, sweetheart, remember how you always said you'd help me hide a body if I needed it? Please tell me you didn't actually kill someone. Better. I need you to audit one. Professionally speaking." I explained the situation, the affair, the business plan, the fact that Corbin had been using my family's connections to court investors for a surgical center he'd never mentioned to me, his wife, who happened to be an architect who specialized in medical facility design. Marin was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Send me everything. Bank statements, credit cards, business documents, anything with his signature. If he's been misappropriating marital assets or misrepresenting financial positions to potential investors, I can bury him so deep he'll need an archaeological team to find his credit score." By Monday morning, November 18th, I had something better than anger. I had documentation. Marin worked fast. By Tuesday afternoon, she'd uncovered a pattern that would have made a forensic accounting textbook jealous. Corbin had been siphoning money from our joint accounts I'd established for household expenses, into a separate LLC he'd registered under the name Summit Surgical Wellness Center. He'd listed himself as CEO and Mirabelle as COO. The business address? A mail drop in North Charleston. They'd been planning this for at least 8 months, right around the time Corbin had started those mysterious conferences in Atlanta. But here's where it got truly beautiful. To attract investors, Corbin had been showing projected revenue based on contracts with Charleston Medical Center and referrals from established relationships with local medical families. He'd literally been selling my family's reputation as his business asset. He's representing himself as connected to the Beaumont medical legacy, Myron explained over the phone. He's telling investors he has preferential relationships with hospital administration and guaranteed patient referral networks, which technically he does, through you. But once you're divorced, those connections disappear. Every investor pitch he's made is based on fraud. Can we prove it? Honey, I can prove it in my sleep. He's been using your family's name as collateral without authorization. That's misrepresentation at minimum. Fraud if any money has changed hands. Has he received any investment capital? I thought about the mysterious deposit I'd seen in his personal account last month. $50,000 from something called MedVenture Capital Group. Yes, I said slowly. I think he has. Then he's committed securities fraud. And if he's used any marital assets to fund this business without your knowledge or consent, that's misappropriation. Clarice, I can't just hurt him in divorce court. I can hurt him in federal court. I sat down on the vintage settee in my home office, the room where I'd designed award-winning hospital wings while my husband was apparently designing his exit strategy, and felt something shift. Not quite revenge. More like justice with a legal degree and a really good filing system. What do you need from me? I asked. Access to everything. Joint accounts, credit cards, tax returns. I need to trace every dollar he's moved in the past year. And I need you to not tell him what we're doing. Can you keep playing the scorned wife for a few more weeks? Darling, I said, I've been playing the supportive wife for 20 years. Scorned is actually easier. Less pretending to care about golf tournaments. Wednesday, November 20th. I did something I'd been avoiding. I called Mirabelle. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding breathless. Probably from hot yoga or moral flexibility exercises. Dr. Fontaine, this is Clarice Hayes. I believe you know my husband. The silence on the other end of the line was exquisite. Mrs. Hayes, I don't think this is appropriate. Oh, I agree completely. None of this is appropriate. But since we're both involved with the same man, I thought we should talk. Woman to woman, professional to professional. I paused. I assume you know Corbin is approximately $340,000 in debt? Another pause. Longer this time. I'm sorry? Medical school loans. I've been paying them off for 15 years, but there's still quite a bit remaining. I thought you should know, since you're planning to go into business with him. The Summit Surgical Wellness Center? Lovely name. Very aspirational. Did he mention that he's about to lose his hospital privileges pending an ethics investigation? Or that every investor contact he's promised you comes through my family, and I'm withdrawing all of those connections effective immediately? I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Quick, shallow breaths. The sound of a business plan dying in real time. Why are you telling me this? She asked finally. Because I believe in informed consent, I said sweetly. You should know exactly what you're getting into. Corbin is charming, brilliant surgeon, absolutely terrible with money, and even worse with honesty. In 6 months, he'll be living in a rented condo in North Charleston, driving a used Honda, and explaining to the medical board why he thought sleeping with a subordinate was consistent with professional ethics. But hey, maybe it'll work out. Love conquers all, right? Even bankruptcy and professional disgrace. I hung up before she could respond. Thursday morning, November 21st, Corbin received 2 pieces of mail at the brownstone, which he was still technically living in, though I'd moved into the guest suite and had the locks changed on the master bedroom. First, a formal request from the IRS for documentation regarding the Summit Surgical Wellness Center LLC and its relationship to his personal tax returns. Second, a letter from MedVenture Capital Group requesting a meeting to clarify certain representations made regarding professional affiliations and referral networks. He found me in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reviewing blueprints for a spa resort project in Kiowa Island. What did you do? His voice was shaking. Actually shaking. I looked up from my blueprints. I'm sorry. Could you be more specific? I've done quite a lot this week. I scheduled a board meeting, hired a forensic accountant, filed for divorce, canceled your car insurance, and designed a hydrotherapy wing. You'll need to narrow it down. The investors, the IRS. How did you— Oh, that. I took a sip of coffee. Turns out when you use someone's family connections as collateral without their permission, they get to inform all relevant parties that those connections are no longer valid. It's called damage control, or fraud prevention, depending on which attorney you ask. Corbin looked like he was having trouble processing oxygen. You're destroying my career. No, darling, I said gently. You destroyed your career when you decided to build it on lies, my money, and my family's reputation. I'm just making sure everyone knows whose foundation you were standing on before it collapsed. The thing about watching a carefully constructed life collapse is that it happens in stages, like a building demolition. First the support beams go, then the walls, and finally, if you've planned it correctly, the whole structure comes down in a cloud of dust and regret. Corbin's demolition began in earnest on Friday, November 22nd. The Charleston Medical Center Ethics Committee met at 9 a.m. I wasn't there, obviously. Scorned wives don't get invited to professional misconduct hearings, but my cousin Barrett gave me a play-by-play over lunch at Magnolia's on East Bay Street. They had documentation of everything, Barrett said, cutting into his she-crab soup. Hotel receipts, text messages someone anonymously submitted. Apparently, Corbin had been using hospital facilities to meet with Mirabelle during work hours. There was security footage of them in the parking garage that was, well, let's just say it wasn't a discussion about anesthesia protocols. How unfortunate, I said, trying not to smile. The anonymous submission had been Marin's idea. Turns out forensic accountants have very creative interpretations of anonymous. The board gave him two options: resign from his administrative positions and submit to a formal review of his relationship with Dr. Fontaine, or face immediate suspension pending a full investigation. He chose resignation. Shocking, I murmured. And here I thought he enjoyed committee meetings so much. Barrett grinned. It gets better. Mirabelle apparently tried to claim she didn't know he was married. Said he'd told her he was separated. For 20 years? That's what the committee asked. She didn't have a good answer. They've recommended she transfer to a different facility. Something about maintaining professional boundaries and institutional reputation. I took a sip of my sweet tea. How absolutely devastating for both of them. By the time I got home that afternoon, Corbin had packed 2 suitcases and was standing in the foyer looking like someone had just explained mortality to him, using small words and hand puppets. I'm staying at the Marriott on Lockwood, he said, not asking, just informing me, as if I cared where he slept. Lovely choice, I said. They have a wonderful breakfast buffet. You'll need it. Unemployment is so taxing. His jaw tightened. I didn't lose my job, Clarice. I resigned from administrative positions. I'm still a surgeon. For now, I agreed pleasantly. Though I imagine it'll be harder to maintain your surgical schedule once the IRS audit is complete and you're dealing with securities fraud charges. Hard to hold a scalpel when your hands are busy holding a legal defense team. You reported me to the IRS. I didn't report anyone to anyone, I said honestly. I simply provided my forensic accountant with access to our joint financial records, which is perfectly legal since they're joint records. What she chose to do with the irregularities she found is entirely her professional obligation. I believe the technical term is mandatory reporting. Corbin's face went through several interesting color variations. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying justice, I corrected. There's a difference. Enjoyment is petty. Justice is earned. You spent 20 years treating me like furniture. Useful, expensive furniture that matched the decor but didn't actually matter. You used my family's name to build your career, my money to fund your lifestyle, and my connections to attract investors for a business you were planning with your mistress, and you genuinely thought I wouldn't notice, or wouldn't care, or wouldn't do anything about it. I picked up my mail from the foyer table. That's not a miscalculation, Corbin. That's profound stupidity. He left without another word. The divorce proceedings moved forward with the efficiency of German engineering. Sutton Paxton was worth every dollar of his considerable retainer. Monday, November 25th, we filed the formal petition. By Wednesday, the 27th, Thanksgiving, ironically, Corbin's attorneys had received the full accounting of what I was requesting: reimbursement for medical school loans, return of investment in his private practice, compensation for use of family connections in his business ventures, and division of assets that heavily favored me since approximately 94% of our marital assets had come from my family trust or my income. His attorney called it unconscionable, Sutton told me over the phone, sounding gleeful. I told him the prenuptial agreement his client signed 20 years ago disagreed. Then I reminded him that we have documentation of securities fraud, misappropriation of marital assets, and misrepresentation to investors. I may have mentioned that federal prosecutors take a very dim view of using family connections as fraudulent collateral. How did he respond? He asked if you'd be willing to settle. Absolutely not. That's what I told him. His exact words were, "She's going to bury him." I said, "No, she's going to make him dig his own grave and then bill him for the shovel." I loved Sutton. By early December, the social fallout was reaching critical mass. The Charleston grapevine had done its work with the efficiency of a military intelligence network. Everyone knew about the affair, the business fraud, the ethics committee resignation, and the IRS investigation. Corbin had gone from outstanding community leader to that doctor who got caught in less than 3 weeks. Mirabelle, meanwhile, had taken a position at a hospital in Columbia, 2 hours away, and had apparently stopped returning Corbin's calls. Turns out love does have limits, and those limits are clearly marked at pending federal investigation. The MedVenture Capital Group demanded return of their $50,000 investment plus damages. Corbin didn't have $50,000. He barely had $5,000 once I'd frozen the joint accounts and his personal credit cards, which I'd been paying off, reached their limits. His partnership at Charleston Orthopedic Associates was quietly dissolved in mid-December. Something about reputation concerns and patient confidence issues. They bought out his share for approximately 30% of what it was worth, citing the ethics investigation as justification for the reduced valuation. By Christmas, which I spent in Savannah with my mother's side of the family, drinking bourbon and laughing about family drama, Corbin was renting a 1-bedroom apartment in North Charleston, driving a 2015 Honda Civic he'd bought off Craigslist, and picking up shifts at an urgent care clinic in Somerville. The country club had politely declined to renew his membership. Something about outstanding dues, the dues I'd been paying. January brought my favorite development, the investor lawsuit. Turns out, when you promise people guaranteed returns based on family connections you don't actually have, and then those connections publicly disavow you, investors get cranky. 3 separate individuals who'd put money into Summit Surgical Wellness Center filed suit against Corbin for fraud and misrepresentation. His attorney, a public defender type he'd found in the yellow pages since he couldn't afford Sutton's rates anymore, called my attorney to ask again about settlement. "What are you offering?" Sutton asked me before the call. "Dignity," I said. "He can keep his medical license if he agrees to every single one of my terms, pays back every dollar I invested in his career over 20 years, and signs a statement acknowledging that his entire professional success was built on my family's foundation. Otherwise, I'll make sure every medical board in South Carolina knows exactly how he conducts business." We settled in February. Corbin signed everything: the divorce decree, the financial settlement, the statement acknowledging his debt, both financial and professional, to my family. He agreed to a payment plan that would take him approximately 15 years to complete, assuming he maintained steady employment. The final hearing was on Tuesday, February 11th. We sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, him in a department store suit that definitely wasn't tailored, me in Armani, while the judge approved the settlement. When it was done, Corbin's attorney tried to approach me in the hallway. "Mrs. Beaumont, I'm sorry, Ms. Beaumont. My client wanted me to tell you that he's sorry. For everything. I looked at the attorney, young, probably 3 years out of law school, still optimistic about human nature, and smiled kindly. Tell your client that I appreciate the apology, and that I hope his next wife reads the fine print. Walking out of that courthouse into the February sunshine felt like graduation, divorce decree in hand, knowing that the brownstone was mine, the money was mine, the reputation was mine, and Corbin was approximately $470,000 in debt with a ruined career and a Honda Civic. That evening, I had dinner with someone I'd met in January. Professor Elliot Marsh, 46, teaches history at the Citadel, owns his own house, has never been married, and thinks women who design buildings are absolutely fascinating. He'd introduced me to his department chair as Clarice Beaumont, the brilliant architect who designed the new Veterans Memorial Wing at Charleston Medical. Not his colleague, not his friend, the brilliant architect. Funny how some men know exactly how to use words. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Corbin at a Harris Teeter in Mount Pleasant on a Saturday afternoon in August. He was wearing scrubs, the generic kind from a medical supply store, not the fancy embroidered ones he used to special order, and pushing a cart containing frozen dinners, store-brand coffee, and the kind of toilet paper that suggests a man who's learned to budget the hard way. I was wearing Lily Pulitzer and holding a bottle of Veuve Clicquot because Elliot and I were celebrating the completion of my Kiowa Island Spa Resort project, the one that had just won a state architecture award. Clarice, Corbin said, stopping his cart. He looked older, tired, like someone who'd aged 5 years in 6 months. Corbin, I replied pleasantly. How are you? I'm managing. He glanced at my champagne. Celebrating something? Architecture award, the Kiowa project. You probably saw it in the paper. He nodded slowly. I did. Congratulations. It looked beautiful. There was an awkward pause, the kind that happens when you run into someone who used to share your bed and now shares absolutely nothing with you except a legal history. I heard you're working at Trident Medical, I said, because I'm not cruel enough to pretend I don't keep tabs. Small city. Word travels. Yeah, it's good. Honest work. He managed a weak smile. No administrative drama. Just surgery. That's good, I said, and meant it. Sort of. Listen, Clarice, I know this is probably awkward, but I really am sorry. For all of it. I was an idiot. Yes, I agreed. You were. He blinked, like he'd expected me to soften that or add something reassuring. I didn't. But you're doing better now? He asked, which was almost funny. Corbin, I'm doing spectacularly. I have a thriving architecture firm, a gorgeous house that's entirely mine, a man who introduces me by my professional accomplishments instead of as furniture, and absolutely zero tolerance for being underestimated. I shifted the champagne to my other hand. So, yes, I'm doing better? Significantly better. He nodded, looking at his cart of sad groceries. I'm glad. You deserved better than how I treated you. I know, I said simply. The question is, why didn't you? He didn't have an answer for that. They never do. I left him standing there in the frozen foods aisle, probably contemplating his life choices somewhere between the pizza rolls and the ice cream, and drove home to my brownstone, the one that's been in my family since 1887 and will be in my family long after I'm gone. Here's what I learned from 20 years of marriage followed by 6 months of spectacular divorce. Some people see you as a supporting character in their story. They genuinely believe you exist to make them look good, fund their dreams, and provide an attractive backdrop for their achievements. They introduce you as someone I work with, because acknowledging your actual role would mean acknowledging their dependence on you, and their ego can't handle that level of honesty. The moment you refuse to play supporting actress anymore, the moment you remind them that you're the lead in your own life and they're barely a footnote in your success story, they collapse, because they built their entire identity on a foundation they never owned. Corbin spent 20 years thinking he was the star of our marriage, the successful surgeon, the community leader, the man everyone admired. He never realized he was standing on a stage I'd built, under lights I'd paid for, reading from a script my family's money had written. The second I walked off that stage, the whole production shut down. Mirabelle learned the same lesson, though hers came with the added bonus of a ruined medical career and a 2-hour commute. Last I heard, she was engaged to a pharmaceutical sales rep in Colombia. I sent a wedding gift, a very lovely set of prenuptial agreement templates, with a note, "Read the fine print, honey." As for me, I'm 42 now, August 2025, designing a veterans rehabilitation center in Beaufort and dating a man who thinks my professional success is attractive rather than threatening. Elliot introduces me at faculty events as Clarice Beaumont, the architect, and genuinely seems proud when people recognize my work. Revolutionary concept, apparently. The Beaumont Foundation's $2.5 million donation? We redirected it to fund a women's professional development center at the Medical University of South Carolina. Because if I'm going to invest family money in healthcare, I'd rather support women building their own careers than men borrowing their wives' reputations. My grandmother, who passed away last spring at 94, left me a note in her will. It said, "Never apologize for being the foundation other people built their lives on. Just make sure they remember who owns the property when the lease expires." Corbin's lease expired the moment he called me a colleague. He's still making payments on that $470,000 debt. 15 years, assuming steady employment. I get a check every month. I donate every single one to the Women's Professional Development Center. Seemed fitting. Because here's the final truth about revenge. It's not about destroying someone. It's about removing yourself from their story and watching them realize they never had a plot without you. Corbin didn't lose everything because I took it away. He lost everything because it was never his to begin with. And that, darling, is the difference between a supporting character and the woman who owns the theater.